Hey everybody, today's words to live by are: for everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to scatter and a time to gather. And that is from Ecclesiastes 3. And I love this passage and I come back to it quite a bit because it teaches me something that sometimes I don't have, which is patience. And so I think, life, it reminds me that life moves in seasons and there's wisdom knowing which season you're in, right? And there's these little things called humility and faith. And people talk about those things quite a bit. But I really think that those two things are what's being taught here because I don't get to tell the universe or anybody really around me what season it is for everybody else. Like I'm not the sun and I don't control the universe as far as I know last time I checked. And so I think there's understanding my own world, the different seasons of life as they're going by so that I could be a more joyful, happier, and more efficient person, right? And so I think the passage itself also tells me that life is not random. There actually is a rhythm to everything. And there's, on one side there's joy and there's sorrow. There's a time for both. There's on one side growth and there's one side rest and there's a time for both. There's gathering and there's letting go. And so the challenge is trusting God's timing when we feel impatient. And I'm smiling right now because I can't help but remember a conversation I had on the phone last week with a woman who informed me that this appointment that I've been waiting for months had to get rescheduled and it would be another couple months and I'd have to go onto a waiting list and all of this sort of stuff. And, the woman could sort of sense my frustration a little bit. And she said, listen, you're going to have to just trust the process. And I was like, that's my problem. And she laughed and we both had kind of a laugh over it because it was so true. I mean, I really do need to trust the timing and the process of it all sometimes. And there's things that I can't control, right? And so the other thing that sort of comes to mind is the fact that at various points in my life, I've been a big city guy. I've lived in New York 3 different times, Los Angeles for 5 years, Chicago a couple times. And so I think when you're in that sort of a lifestyle, things move really quickly and life moves quickly. And the things I wanted to do could go as fast or as slow as I wanted. And more often than not, it went fast at warp speed, right? And so there didn't seem to be any season for rest. There didn't seem to be any season for rejuvenating, right? And so the reality is that I got moving and I didn't stop, and there was always more to get done by yesterday, seemingly. But for most people, that really isn't how life goes. And I think for the more enlightened people, that certainly is not how life goes. And it wasn't until a little bit later in my life that I understood the value of this passage. And it was when I was on a farm in the country for 2 years. And that's where I learned that there's a season for rest. There's a season to be exhausted. There's a season for renewal and rejuvenation and growth. And there's a season to work really, really hard. But there was much more of a balance to life's cadence when I understood what season I was in. And so it's not sort of a laziness sort of thing, but there's just more of a balance, right? It's not, when you're in your season of rest, it's not like you're not doing anything per se. It's just that you're understanding that there actually is a time and a season for rest. And so with those two examples, they're sort of the opposite sides where, one is fast pace. I seemingly control my own universe and the timing of it. And then the other side, there's I'm really at the mercy of nature and the universe and its timing. And so I think what a lot of people like to do is to try to balance both sides and sort of understand both sides and live someplace in the middle of that. And so I think, this passage also helps me to appreciate that my own will, there's something to having my own will, but that God and the universe, has its own divine timing that probably once in a while chuckles at what I perceive to be my own will So I think that's another takeaway. But I would just urge you to remember when you're feeling a certain way to trust the season you're in, because it has its own purpose too. So if you enjoyed today's reflection, please like and or subscribe, and I will see you all again very soon.